All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to episode four. So before we jump in, as I alluded in episode three, I wanted to talk to you about what you're going to hear today. In setting the stage, this episode is part of something that I'm calling signal inquiries. This is where we're going to take a topic, we're going to go deep, and we're going to try to understand what signals are beneath the noise of that topic. Everything you're going to hear today is based off of leveraging the research tools of both ChatGPT and Grok. So the deep research by ChatGPT, the deep search by Grok. So what does that mean? And I recommend, if you haven't already, to look into these tools on these platforms because they are incredible. So what that means is I'm working with these tools which act as a research assistant, and they're going to pull together insights from all across the internet, right? Articles, papers, podcasts, all publicly available data, as well as leveraging, uh, the LLM to help, form an opinion and talk about something. Um, Now, that being said, leveraging this obviously means I'm not doing all of the research myself, but I am driving the narrative. It's a very interesting way of doing this because it allows me to be the editor in chief, and I'm able to look at what it's provided and kind of help, add some color to it, shape what are we seeing, what do we like, what do we don't like, to kind of help explain what we're looking to convey with respect to the topic. This process is going to help me go give a deeper take on one of these topics that I'm excited to share with you today. And, I'm doing this, it's purely out of curiosity, not ego. So I think like a general disclaimer for this is any of these episodes that I do will not be taking credit for the content. I just, again, want to explain like, hey, this is leveraging these tools to help explain a topic that I'm excited to convey with you here today. Um, Additionally, these papers that are generated, I will be posting to my Substack and linking to it so you can consume it yourself. If anything, it's just an interesting way to learn about a topic, to leverage a research assistant that's able to pull all this data and information and do hard work that, you wouldn't be able to do in as quick amount of time as it's able to spit this out. Very excited to share this, to get started, to do more of these. I have like 15 to 18 topics and ideas that I've written down that I'm hoping to share on future episodes. Um, let's get into it. And if any of this resonates, or if you think I've missed the mark on something, I definitely want to hear from you, right? This is a work in progress. This entire channel has been iterative, right? We're just trying something here today. So let's pivot into the topic for today, which are civilization drags. So this episode was started months ago by a tweet from, surprise, surprise, Icon's Jason Ballard. And the tweet essentially was stating, food, water, and shelter are these foundational pillars for civilization's existence, um, but they can be a drag. And obviously, housing and shelter is the civilizational drag that he has chosen to pursue and is doing a hell of a job in addressing. But then he posted a second question, which was, what are additional civilizational drags that are pulling us down and preventing us from advancing um, as a species? And this is what got the wheels going, right? Well, this is a very interesting topic. I have some ideas. Let's use deep research from ChatGPT to see what we can put together. And it also hit me because it's so true, right? Like we've solved a lot of these basic concepts, but for some reason we're still stuck and it's still stuck. And that seems to be a theme that is resonated um, everywhere, right? So, his tweet, it set me down a rabbit hole. What is holding us back? There are some patterns that seem to have emerged. Um, this one was also, excuse me, an iterative process, just simply because not knowing how to utilize the tool, how do you kind of guide it? What does it spit out? Like, how does that all work? Like, this was it was a very interesting process. I was very glad to be a part of. So, what I want to convey today are a couple of themes and ideas from this report that was put out, and we can kind of talk about some of these civilization drags. So, let's talk about the first one. These are not, and one thing to keep in mind too, that we're seeing with some consistencies and some patterns here is these aren't tech problems. They're friction problems. The solutions, they do exist. The demand is there, but these systems just seem to be jammed up with an incredible amount of red tape. So red tape is at the top of the list as far as what's holding us back. There's a lot of institutional bloat, which we're seeing being addressed by Doge. There's definitely misaligned incentives, and you can say that about any and everything um, when it comes to progress. We do have a lot of talent as well, chasing some of the trivial problems out there, which does not help. And we're also seeing a fragmentation of social trust within the United States. So, what we want to cover in this episode, specifically from this report on civilizational drags that I put together with deep research, are three things. We want to cover housing and its inertia, we want to cover the infrastructure decay, and we want to cover what we're calling the meaning deficit here. So, let's get started and dive in. Um, so the first one, it's a bottleneck that we're really pretending not to see, right? I mean, housing supply, it's not a tech problem, it's just a policy problem. We have so many tools, so many willing and abled people and companies that are looking to build homes, but they're still being bottlenecked by misaligned incentives and policy issues. In addition to your standard, greenfield construction, we have modular homes like boxable, we have prefab homes, we have 3D printing. We have companies that could technically deliver a house in as little as 24 hours in some cases. Um, but why aren't they allowed to do anything? I mean, approvals these days can take up to years, and it's not technology again, it's just the governance that's dragging this, along. So, it makes me wonder, like, why are we still stuck in some of this, 1950s post-World War II thinking, right? It's a lot of it is this suburban sprawl model that, it takes a lot of time and planning, and there's definitely reasons for that, and you can see some of the value in it. I mean, it's built what we have today, but as we advance, as we progress, as we bring new technologies to the forefront, we need new policies and we need new everything really to address some of these issues. It also gets me wondering, like, why are there so few leaders that want to reimagine what a community or a town could be? I definitely think this is an opportunity for us to take a first principles approach to towns and communities. And, instead of building what is right next to what already exists, like somebody should take, the challenge of let's just go build a town somewhere that it's just a plot of land, and where do we go from there? I think I just actually read the other day before I finalized the script that Amazon, either Amazon or Bill Gates, I forget who, was spending, I think, $80 million. They bought up a plot of land well, plot is not the right word. They brought acreages of land in Arizona with the intent of building a new city. Um, so we definitely want to monitor that and see what that entails. Um, we're very excited to check that out. Hopefully, I can post more in a later episode. But, ultimately, we're just seeing such a lag in the regulations. that nobody wants to talk about. I mean, we should be, at this point, we should be able to build what we want where we want. I know there's reasons for not doing that, but with a $3.8 million housing deficit, why aren't we building more houses faster? Like, why is the supply not there? Um, so those are some really big issues, and we want to dive in and give some examples of where, the rebuilding and where permitting and regulation is causing a problem. So. To give you an idea, there have been a few things that have happened recently that should still be top of mind for a lot of us. So this being May 16th, 2025, it still could be, well, certainly for these people, fresh in their mind, but in 2024, there was a terrible fire in the Pacific Palisades in LA. I mean, thousands of homes were destroyed overnight. I think the final tally was somewhere in 7,000 and change. Just terrible, homes that had existed for decades, vibrant community. In the blink of an eye, everything is destroyed. As of May 2025, as I sit here filming this, there have only been four rebuild permits approved. There are crazy issues with governing bodies that were set up back in post-World War II eras with antiquated thinking and antiquated ideas and approaches to what should be a standard in this area. Um, it needs an upgrade. It needs an update. In Palisade, California, I mean, there are also these post-camp fire rebuilds, and even there, less than 30% of these destroyed properties have received a permit since the fire. So, like, why is there such a paralysis to addressing this? Really, it's shocking to everybody, but those in power over there, it seems to be. I think one of the biggest issues that we've seen is the governor, Karen Bass, has said, well, we're going to leverage, AI and some of these tools and this wonderful buzzword of AI, but you have to actually execute and deploy it. And been following an account on X that's kind of monitoring and showing what the process is like. He's on like day 18 after submitting everything and anything that could be needed, and everything is still stalled. That's not how AI works. The report that I'm pulling from to tape this segment, that took 23 minutes. It spit out, I think it was 47 pages for this report. 47 pages, combing the entire web, everything and anything that was publicly available to put together a 47-page report in 20 something minutes is incredible. There definitely exists the technology to leverage AI, learning language model, whatever you want to call it, to speed up this process. So it seems to be a little bit of funny business over there in the governor's administration. Um, outside of, the Palisades, which is obviously top of mind, I mean, as far as other issues and regulation and things that are just taking way too much time, San Francisco, for example, as of 2022, the average time for a standard multifamily project gets stalled at permitting or city council stages, um, that can take between 450 to 630 days. Can you imagine almost 2 years from when you want to get a project going to see it's finally been approved? I mean, throw out the human capital component of that, like the financials behind that. Like, what company is going to tie up, and we'll call it escrow or savings, the money for a project that they don't even know if they're going to get 2 years out? It's incredible. It's asinine, frankly. And sticking with the LA area, as far as any proposed affordable housing projects, they routinely stall at those city council stages because people just don't want them in their backyard, which, you know, not trying to get too political here, but I suppose you can understand that. But if that's the will of the people, then you have to stop again continuously dealing with those proposals and go propose something new. The city council should be making suggestions or recommendations like, yeah, we don't want this in our backyard. Okay, again, throwing out the politics behind it. Where could we put it? surely companies and organizations are looking at land that's outside of the city. They're looking at areas of opportunity. That should be top of mind, not what is already existing in there. So, policy just continues to be a drag. But then there are issues of zoning and permitting, and as we alluded to in the last comment, this NIMBYism, which stands for not in my backyard. So, some facts to work off of nationwide, more than about 75% of the urban residential land is zoned exclusively for single family homes. Um, but cities like Austin, certainly, Dallas, Minneapolis, they're starting to reform because most of these places are clinging to these outdated zoning codes that are from the 20s and 50s. We need new zoning codes for the 2020 into 50s. Single family homes can definitely, I mean, it's definitely it's part of the American dream, but multifamily and more of this community idea, those have value too. But the system is still actively preventing innovation within the housing industry and the density and the design. Like it'd be really, really incredible to be able to see what would be developed if there were just a few rules, if there were three rules instead of 300 rules. Um, so yeah, this is something that we need to take a look at, needs to evolve with this new era that we find ourselves in. Because, we have to also give zoning its flowers, so to speak, because it did start out as a safety tool, right? And like from a macro level, a 10,000 foot view, you can see how zoning was going to play a key role in the development of our cities and towns, right? Like you don't want heavy industry spitting out toxic fumes next to houses where people are growing up, right? Like that just you don't have to have a debate by that. That just makes sense, right? But it seems to have evolved from a safety tool to, a wealth protection tool, right? And so, a couple of comments on that. I mean, the ability to segment for single family homes, but then also prevent those homes from being built, you are ultimately stalling competition both on a housing standpoint as well as a business standpoint, right? I mean, again, this idea that you could build something anywhere you wanted to, if you are preventing that from happening because of zoning, you are in essence you are in essence safeguarding your own self-interests, um, which really makes us wonder, like, what would happen if we reimagined permitting from a first principles perspective? This would be a wonderful topic to dive into. It would, result in us having to really look at what are the key things that are needed in a town for a group of people to flourish and survive. And I don't want to give it too much talk and conversation just yet because I want to dive more into some of the issues behind it. But these concepts of 15-minute cities, like, yes, there are definitely pros and cons to that. There's, the idea to be able to walk everywhere. I mean, like that just screams community. That screams promotion of, being involved and getting outdoors and not this kind of isolationism that we've adopted with newer technologies over the last few decades. But in the same vein, there's this dystopian concept that it's going to prevent people from going anywhere, which I don't in I don't completely buy, but I definitely see the merits to that argument. And it's definitely worth imagining. But this idea that we should be rebuilding towns from a first principle nature, what are the bare minimums, and then going from there that people would need, I think there's definitely value in that. So a couple of extra facts and stats just about zoning and permits and everything. Um, you know, as you know, we've talked about this idea of what was decided back in the 1950s and kind of what the cause of that was, between 1950 and 1970, the United States averaged about 1.3 million residential permits a year, which is an incredible stat. Today, even with a much higher population, we're only averaging about 1.46 million permits a year, and that's as of 2025. So we're barely keeping up because I mean, the baby boom, um, while there are while there have been conversations and data does show that civilization is on the decline, we still haven't even caught up with the increase in civilization since the 70s and the 80s. And this is, I mean, apparent by all the housing needs and housing shortages that we have. So now all of this that we're talking about with respect to housing. Yeah. Why is it so important? Well, again, it becomes a drag on civilization itself. Um, Housing restrictions in just a handful of the United States metro areas cost the local economy an estimated 1.6 trillion annually, or that's about 13.5% of our GDP. That's more than the cost of the Great Recession. It's not just about rents being high, it's about all this opportunity that's being choked off at scale. So essentially, what this is saying is the housing shortage that we have is actually causing a drop in our GDP, right? Which that should be a no-brainer then. Like, we want to make America bigger, faster, stronger, better for everybody. Housing is it's just part of that core function, that bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I mean, we need shelter. And that just like makes sense when you give it 2 seconds to think about. Like, yeah, we need a place that we feel safe and secure, and then we can flourish from there. But unfortunately, we're starting to see that housing has become an investment vehicle, right? Um, Companies like BlackRock, the house flipping shows, excuse me, the just even local people that want to buy homes, flip them and move on. And it's not like, again, we're not calling out capitalism. We're not looking to, shame anybody that has taken part in building our way of life, but we do need to rethink it, right? Because we shouldn't have our supply choked off. Housing should be a foundation of the United States and our community. And yes, there are going to be conflicting opinions on is housing a right. It shouldn't be a right. I mean, the rights that we have are certainly outlined in our Bill of Rights as a nation, but we have to look at our reality and we have to reframe things to, okay, like if we have a housing deficit, we know it's a drop in our GDP. We know there are all these societal issues for not having these homes. Maybe it should be a priority. And I think we are starting to look at it. Um, because again, a lack of supply of homes, it fuels gentrification, but it also fuels displacement. A lot of poor decision making is going into the housing insecurity, and it's just leading to more and more conflict. What we would expect to see is when there's more supply, there will be lower prices of homes, which is going to give more choice. There's going to be less drag on people. There's going to be more prosperity. That's everything that we want to see. So now we want to, talk about, who's actually making strides here, who's doing good work. Icon, which was in my last episode, I mean, they're 3D printing entire communities, both in Texas, Mexico has been another project of theirs. A lot of these are targeting low-income families or veterans or disaster recovery. I mean, they're taking really good opportunities to provide housing to people that actually need it and then learn from it. Another company that we wanted to highlight is Boxable, and these are flat pack modular homes. They're built in a factory. Once delivered, they can unfold in an hour, and pricing is starting around $60,000. Again, another great opportunity and option here. Other groups that we could talk about on a later episode, Mighty Builders, Factory OS, they're all companies that are demonstrating that tech is not the bottleneck. It's the permitting, it's the government getting in the way, which, surprise, surprise. Um, so, again, housing inertia, it's a choice, but it's not an inevitability. There are companies that are looking to challenge the status quo, to fight this, and it kind of has to have us ask the question, like, what would towns look like if we stripped away all these old rules and we built from a first principle lens? We also need additional infrastructure and roads and rail and other means of public transportation that could build new cities that give you the ability to get to, major hubs for job opportunities, right? The flip side of that too is a lot of work is becoming remote. So, homes or towns or communities that are built around working from home could be completely reimagined, which I think there's definitely going to be value in that. So, to close on the housing, um, you know, housing inertia, it's a civilizational drag that we don't see and talk about enough because we've normalized this dysfunction. But we clearly see that there are builders here, people are paying attention, and it's time to clear the runway and let these people cook. So, yeah, we're very excited, very bullish on housing and what is out there. The next topic that we want to cover is infrastructure decay throughout the United States. Um, it should come as no surprise. I mean, infrastructure, it's the skeletal system of our civilization. It's the backbone of our civilization. And ours has been collapsing under its own weight for years. We're still operating critical national systems, these roads, these bridges, water systems, power, electricity. A lot of it is still being done on infrastructure that was built in the 50s and 60s. And, while it's great that it's lasted this long and a lot of that has been from maintenance, we still see constant breakdowns. We see slow approvals for something that's new. And frankly, the public is losing faith in what, should just be operating behind the scenes without any issues. An additional comment that we're learning is a lot of the infrastructure, a lot of the key components that power, maintain, and keep going our infrastructure are from parts that are built by, currently our adversary in China. Like that should be a wake-up call. That should all be home built for obvious reasons. Um, but that's like a macro level. One that I think will resonate with all of you is just besides the constant breakdowns and the slow approvals, like what do you see on a day-to-day basis? Like living here in the Chicagoland area, we have a saying, there are two seasons. It's either construction season or it's pothole season, and it's usually pothole season. The mechanics out here make a killing off of suspension and tires and alignment. I mean, the potholes are outrageous. We see power outages. I mean, just the other day, my power was out for about 15, 20 minutes. Not really complaining about it. I'm fine, but it was out because it's gotten so hot that everybody's started to put on their air conditioning, and that's not good. Additionally, we see transit delays because of road work or railroad work. I mean, my girlfriend, she takes the train into the city for her job as a nursing manager, and I was excited for her because it should really be flawless at this point. I mean, it's been about what has it been? It's been about 8 years since I've taken public transportation regularly, and her first week on the job taking the train, it was anywhere from 3 minutes to 30 minutes late. Heck, she tried to get on a train. She tried to catch the earliest train so she could get in the office by 7 o'clock for a meeting, which sounds miserable. The train that she wanted to take that would get here well before 7 was 45 minutes late, thus making her late to the call. That's insane. That should never happen. Um, we take this infrastructure for granted up until it fails, and then we sound the alarms. That shouldn't even be thought of. That should be top of mind. Like, your health being the most important part of, your well-being and your upbringing. Same with our infrastructure. The health of our infrastructure really kind of drives the health of our nation, right? So as far as like the American infrastructure, just some reporting that was able to be pulled. As of 2023, the ASCE gave a report on the United States infrastructure as a whole. They gave it a C minus. A C minus. I mean, I got a lot of C's and C minuses, and I'm not proud of that. We should not be proud of that. Additionally, we have over 46,000 bridges that are classified in the United States as structurally deficient. Many of them are over 50 years old, and nothing has been done to them. We have water systems that are leaking up to 6 billion gallons a day, not a year, a day. We lose 20% of treated drinking water before it even reaches homes, and that's from the EPA in 2024. So, what does that say about us if our civilization, if our literal foundations are crumbling, right? Use the human body as an example. If you aren't taking care of yourself, if you're not eating right, if you're not exercising, if you're not doing all the right things that you know you should be doing and doing the maintenance and upkeep that you know you should be doing, how can you expect to perform at the top, right? And that's the same about our country. Like, I think there's a great argument to be made that our country crumbling is a result of us not taking care of the infrastructure that's supposed to have been built and powered the last 100 years. Well, it hasn't gotten an upgrade or an update. It's like you don't do the same workouts in the same routine and expect different results. Well, we've been doing the same routine for decades and nothing has changed, and that's not good. When this became the norm to not take care and maintain our infrastructure is beyond me. Um, you know, as far as the bottlenecks that are here as well, I mean, since 20 since the year 2000, this is according to the World Bank in a 2024 study, since the year 2000, the United States infrastructure investment as a share of GDP has declined by 35%. That is insane. It should be going up. It should be going up as the years go by based on how old everything is. Additionally, surprise, surprise, projects that are proposed can take up to 7 years for approval. Um, a lot of this has to do with environmental impact studies, which I can understand the value in that, but they shouldn't take 4 to 5 years, which the DOT is reporting as of 2023. 4 to 5 years to get an environmental impact study on something that needs to be built. That's asinine. That's also what we expect this new administration and through Doge to be ripping out and reinventing because it should not be taking these longs. Infrastructure used to be a point of national pride. I mean, all the building that we did in the post-World War era was a thing of pride, not just in the United States, but in the world, right? Everybody rebuilt. It's time for peace. Let's build everything up and get on with our lives. And that's a very glib way of stating it, but that's essentially what happened, right? We used to take pride in the infrastructure of this country. Now it's just an afterthought. Um, One thing that I did see as President Trump has been in the Middle East and the Gulf, securing investments in the United States, one of the things that a commentary that I happen to agree with is so President Trump has a background in a variety of things, but mainly real estate and real estate development. The thought is him touring the infrastructure and the capitals and the areas of these Middle Eastern countries and the grandness of it is going to light a fire in him to apply that to the United States because we've sat in the dark and on the sideline too long. This should be a point of national pride. But it just continuously gets caught up in the bureaucratic tangles and these lack of emergencies. Like they're never problems until it's a problem, right? Another recent example, the water in Flint, Michigan. That was never a problem, despite everyone knowing it was an issue, until it became a problem when nobody had the water and the levels of clean drinking water that they needed. So definitely something to continue to look into. Now, why does this matter? I mean, it should be obvious, but we want to throw, some stats and some things your way for consideration. So congestion in when it comes to transportation and cars, it costs Americans $120 billion annually in wasted time and fuel. And this is from the Global Traffic Scorecard of 2024. So this is a recent study. $120 billion annually is wasted. That's insane. Blackouts and grid failures have increased by about 40% between 2029 and 2024, and that's from the Department of Energy as of 2024. For every $1 that is invested in infrastructure returns, we see $3.70 in economic growth. And that's from actually a bipartisan policy group that reported in 2024. So we know there are issues. We know that it's going to help our growth, both in our pocketbooks as well as the economy. Like, why shouldn't this be? Why is this even an issue? Why is this not a focus? This isn't about potholes, right? Although in Chicago it kind of is. But this isn't about potholes. It's about our national competitiveness, our resilience, and our dignity. Um, when we have other nations like China and Germany that are investing in what can be, not what has been. Oh my gosh, I just dropped a Kamala line. That's so funny. Um, they are investing in the future and they are looking to build resilient systems. We are building systems that continue to crumble and decay, and we only address when it's convenient or it's an issue. So, what would happen if we actually took it seriously? Because we've been running on a crumbling mid-century infrastructure system for far too long. The joke would be all of uh, what would the future look like? I mean, I have to think the future, we can only go up from here. And that should be a focus both of, private and public funding for sure. Now let's talk about, who is actually breaking through and making strides in this. We want to highlight there are some smart infrastructure pilots that are going on. Kansas City has a digital twin initiative that's reducing traffic by 15% in pilot zones. We have a public and a private partnership, the Denver International Airport expansion, which I've flown in and out of Denver for years. Love that airport. For any of the lizard people underneath listening, give me a shout out if you can. But that was a $2 billion private-led project that has caught and they were able to cut approval timelines by 30% by working with the private institutions with government aided approaches that wanted to cut down on it. They saw approval timelines cut down by 30%. We also have companies that are producing AI-driven innovation like grid monitoring and predictive maintenance tools. A couple of companies I would love to talk about on future episodes. But we have to again ask ourselves, what would a first principle redesign of the American infrastructure look like? Um, I think we'd have to look at the major areas of transportation within the United States, and we'd have to look for, opportunities. Like the issue with stuff like this, and the issue with any conversation around where money gets deployed is someone is always going to be, barking about why is it going here? Why isn't it going there? The latest example I can give is I got on a bit of a back and forth with uh, somebody that was calling out that the Tesla supercharger infrastructure was terrible. And I said, actually, I think most people would say it's pretty well done and to give you the ability to quite literally travel anywhere in the United States. Are there timing considerations that aren't ideal? Of course, but the battery technology is not there to charge the battery as quickly as it is to fill up a tank of gas. Um, his response was to that, to my encouragement, was simply, well, I can't go anywhere I want to go. It does terrible here, here, and here. And I said, that's a fair point, but I would like to think, and this is the point on, what is it from a first principle standpoint? I would like to think that the decisions that they made were, where is this going to impact the most number of people? Let's get that going. Let's get some consistency, some repetition, some buy-in, and then we can start to look at the data and identify other areas to build out this infrastructure based on where are people going and what does the data show us. So that's what I would like. That's the take that I would like to think that we would take with our infrastructure to reimagine it from a first principles standpoint. I really think we also need to just be open and transparent about what new systems we want to incorporate. The high-speed rail system, that could be a whole other episode, but there are new technologies, new means of transportation, and new automations that are being built that I think we're going to just have to look and see like it's not that car ownership is gonna fade and decline, but like we could do so much better with so many different types of public infrastructure and public transportation that people wouldn't want to put as much money into their personal car. Um, I still personally will have my truck, but that's neither here nor there. So to summarize the infrastructure, your body only performs as well as it's maintained. Same for our country. Our infrastructure has been stuck in the past. It's really a foundation of rust. The decay has been invisible up until it fails catastrophically, and that's what we are starting to see. We really need to treat this as a national emergency. It's definitely something that needs to be prioritized, and I hope that this new administration takes it seriously. So, wrapping out the infrastructure, we want to pivot into the last signal from the civilizational drag paper, and it's it's a drag that we don't really quantify. Not every drag here is physical. This one can be cultural, it can be psychological, but it's definitely invisible. There's nothing tangible that you can look to, point to with consistency. This is where social cohesion, trust, and belonging have started to erode. We are seeing societal stalls, fragmentation. We are turning inward as a people to our groups and our tribes. And we really should be, really the biggest tribe is the human species, civilization. Um, from there, you could say the United States and Americans, if you get even more granular, until you start to get, you know, until you start to kind of question some of these things. We're not going to go incredibly in depth in that, but, your state pride, right? Like, I'm an Illinoisan, like that whole thing, like, we've turned so inward, and this has become a deficit and a drag of meaning as a people. It's dragging us down in a way that GDP just can't measure. We've seen a rise in loneliness and isolation, in tribalism. I mean, there's a whole case to be made for all of the advancements of technology, and social media has made us lonelier and lonelier. We have definitely begun to isolate ourselves, and become more tribal. I mean, one thing that I remember reading, and ironically enough, I've taken part in this, is back in the Cold War eras and probably even post World War II, growth of our country, there was all this talk about the third place, right? You've got your home, you have your work. These are two places. The third place was this area that you just were completely removed and devoid of your home life, your work life, and it was just an opportunity with other like-minded people. Now, one that should be obvious is if you have a religion or faith, that could be seen as your third place. But that also is kind of seen as a could be seen as kind of a core tenet, and we're going to move that to the side. The idea, ironically enough, was the bowling alley. And I say ironically because I have since joined a bowling league recently, Wednesday nights. I'll let you guys know how I do. But this idea is like the bowling league is where people went to, you were active, you were blowing off steam. It was just a place to get away from that provided community, provided activity, provided the ability to vent and congregate and do all of these great things. Um, that seems to have faded as we have turned inward to ourselves and to screens and other means of technology that, yes, there is a practicality and something that is positive, but we didn't intend these consequences, and now we're kind of scrambling to get out of them. So, a lot of these systems have also been designed and optimized for consumption, but not connection. You could argue that they were potentially built for connection, but as the saying goes, if something is free, you are the product, right? If you're not paying for something, you are the product. So us being on all these social media apps, we are the product for consumption of other things. That's not, we've seen the long-term effects of that, and that has not been a good thing. Um, so in diving into this idea of this invisible drag, this issue of social cohesion and belonging, kind of talk about where we've been and how we got here. We've seen this is an eye-opening stat is we have seen a two-parent household decline by 85%, or I'm sorry, we've seen a two household decline from 85% to 70% from 1968 to 2023. So a 15% drop is insane. Marriage rates are at a 50-year low. Lot to say on that. That could be a whole other topic. Relationships are tough. Anybody that says otherwise, they're looking at everything through rose-colored glasses and they're not being honest with you. Um, so we've got this internal, issue with social cohesion and trust. Additionally, this is an eye-opening stat. Only 18% of Americans express any level, including a high level of trust in our national institutions. And this is up to 2024. This is just last year. I completely agree with that stat. I think we're seeing a very important shift away from some of these mainstream applications, and it's called citizen journalism, but at the end of the day, like, people are building platforms and trying to showcase stories and takes on things that aren't driven by forces that are behind the scenes. um, can go into a whole other episode on that. Additionally, participation in any local civic group, I mean, churches or community clubs, that's down about 45% since 2000. And that's from a Pew Research report as of last year. So, you know, we don't know who to trust. We can't trust um, seems we can't trust each other. We aren't trusting some of these national institutions that were supposed to be the bedrock of our country. And this idea of community and being within our, local groups, our local and our national groups, we're not participating in. We're driving very inward. I mean, this should be a no-brainer why there's so much volatility. And I don't want to sit here and say everything sucks, but like, it's eye-opening enough. And even though some of these, sources of information are designed to amplify things, like, it's still there. There's still a lot of disconnect between our fellow Americans. There's still been a lot of forces that are driving us apart from one another. There's still this issue of this, this cohesive, this, I'm going to say it, this family unit that is used to be the bedrock of our country is now kind of laughed at, which is kind of wild to me. But we see a disappearance of these shared spaces of various, rituals and, community activities, areas that we could all congregate. I mean, we've found pleasure and community and the good kind of tribalism in everywhere other than they were meant and designed to be a part of. Um, Online communities, in the beginning, it could have been seen as an opportunity to congregate. Now it's replaced the depth and the connectiveness of the physical ones. It's emerged keyboard warriors that, I mean, there's a lot to be said about that too. If we want to talk more about, the broader drag, the fragmentation, the mistrust that we see here, I mean, you know, the misinformation and the algorithmic bubbles have eroded our ability to kind of decipher and appreciate, what's good, what's bad, what's real, what's wrong. And this has been happening for decades. I mean, digital entertainment consumption is up 200% since 2020 started in COVID. Um, so we're consuming more, but we're even more lonely and depressed than we were pre-COVID. I mean, it really drove us inward and to consume whatever was on that screen. Um, a Lancet study from 2024 explained that social media was correlated with a 30% increase in feelings of isolationism, which should be no surprise. There are a ton of documentaries out there that explain how we got to this point and how our reliance on social media and what others say, do, and think about us has made us even more self-conscious. You know, these tools that were probably hopefully built for connectivity in the beginning have divided us because the algorithms have been able to pinpoint what do we like, what don't we like, and then give us more and more and more of a taste of that. They've latched onto that dopamine ability, and I completely agree with this. Since I have gotten off of Facebook, since I have done my best to remove a lot of social media in my life, like I noticed a complete upward swing. Removing my phone at certain points of the day so I'm not like looking to go back to it has been such an advantageous decision that I've made for myself. But we have to also ask, is there a way that we can reclaim this technology to kind of amplify the belonging and not the dividing? And to be quite frank, that is a decision that these social media companies would have to make that would inevitably take a hit in their bottom line. And as everything is economics, not something that we're going to see anytime soon, unfortunately. Um, so why does all this matter? Why is trust and social cohesion? Why is this important? And why has it become a drag on civilization? Well, strong communities, stable families, and shared narratives, they shouldn't be luxuries. They should be a hidden infrastructure of resilience. From an OECD report in 2024, societies that have a higher level of social trust, they recover faster from any kind of shocks or traumatic situations. They're more adapt to change, and they're able to innovate a lot more readily. But when we're all focused on the same thing and the same driving forces are, driving our conversations and our attention, when there's no meaning, progress is going to stall because, we feel like we're a part of a system that we're tethered to, and there's no escape. But this fuel, this cohesiveness, this, ability to stand with your community, it makes us more resilient, more hopeful, more willing to build. And yeah, I guess I have to be honest, and I'm really trying not to make this political. Like, the last 4 years have not felt great for a variety of reasons. And this started with COVID too. So like the post-COVID environment that we found ourselves has not felt the greatest. But the ability, but now this new administration, this new focus, this new directive, like calling out the issues and let's go and fix them and let's be more connected as a country has made me very hopeful, very willing to build. I don't know that I would have thought to even do something like this. Like this episode, this Breck to the Future, this is me like jumping on something that I've always wanted to do, and I feel like yes, I feel like I'm in a position to do this, a way to connect, even if it's just one person. This is completely worth my time. And our meaning and how we find meaning, it shapes everything from our communities to our mental health to who we are as people. Like we can only go up from here. So yeah, like we need to take back the trust in this country. We need to find community again. We need to find, this cohesiveness that we used to have. We need to find another common purpose, which I would hope could be driven by this administration for us to come together to attack and tackle some of the, misguided approaches to everything that has made this country great. We need to, get back and start competing with the world and not just rest on our laurels. Um, yeah, no, it's very exciting. But we can't do it ourselves, and there are, areas that are taking new approaches and are breaking through. One of these ideas that we can maybe pull from is from the Scandinavian countries. Not all of it, but there are things that I think that are very interesting that we could model. One of them is universal childcare. Um, you know, the United States has had one of the arguably one of the worst policies when it comes to childcare, when it comes to time off you can take to be a part of, your child's upbringing. Just hearing prices for daycare for kids is astronomical. That could be fixed by a number of different ways. We need the elder care as well in Scandinavian countries. I mean, this idea of community and being, with your parents, with your aging relatives, this like core tenet of family support could help reduce this societal fragmentation that we see. Other ideas are, co-housing or, a new take on urbanism, right? Like there are these communities in Serenity, Georgia, and Babcock Ranch, Florida, that are rethinking their town's designs and really forcing, in a good way, this human scale interaction and a better idea of community. And then again, like I wonder if, as we turn the page finally, hopefully on COVID, like, are we going to see, new faith-based and nonprofit organizations? Heck, the Pope is from Chicago and from the United States. Maybe we see a revival of faith within the United States. And yes, there are right or wrong reasons for that, but like this idea of community that's driven by something bigger, better, higher than yourself, this is what we've been missing as a country. Maybe not so much missing, but it's been on a steep decline. And that's something that we can really do and really rebuild. So yeah, we have to ask ourselves, like, what would happen if we designed a system that was optimized for advancing and meaning and belonging, but not focused on, the clicks and the bottom line? Like, this could be our great challenge of the 21st century. And this could be that non-physical, tangible drag that's been driving us down that we could, help kickstart this country and get us competitive on the world stage again. Because I think we've actually been failing in a lot of places that we're just reluctant to admit. So, the meaning deficit, it's the silent drag. We can't build a flourishing future if we don't rebuild and identify the bonds that have held us together and will continue to hold us together. So, to conclude, I mean, today I've wanted to talk about some of the invisible forces that are slowing us down, these civilizational drags, these friction points that are stalling progress, even when the solutions are obvious and staring us in the face. From our housing issues to this crumbling infrastructure, a growing deficit of meaning within our people. I mean, these aren't problems of invention. They're problems of implementation, of coordination, of willpower, of identifying the issue and how do we make this better? And this is a call to how do we make this better? Um, what frustrates me is, we were coming out of the world wars. We were a country that wanted to build and make everything as great as we could within the United States. But along the way, we should look to take care of the most amount of people, but along the way, the smallest voices got the loudest and were listened to the most. And I believe that, you know, we've detoured from where we could be to accommodate a smaller group of people, whoever that is. And this isn't calling them out. This isn't um, not looking to get political, or I'm not looking to identify who that small group of people is, but there's a reason that certain things worked for hundreds and thousands of years, that concepts, that ideas did. And that's what we need to get back to. This idea of community, I mean, we as a people need to be better. We need housing that makes us feel confident and secure so that we can feel confident and secure in everything that we do. Then we can be more confident as a people, and then the opportunities are endless. These drags, they've slowed us down for too long. I'm very excited by companies that are tackling these things because, they're not inevitable, right? When we align visions and leadership and action, we can overcome at anything. Um, Civilizational drags, we see them, but we have to call them out. So I encourage you to call them out in your city, your industry, your daily life. Like, we should see what's failing, but we should also provide solutions. Like that's one thing I've always hated is calling out problems, but not providing solutions and ideas that can support that. So yes, to kind of summarize everything and this, this approach, this signal inquiry, I'm very excited to do these and these types of series. I already have 15 to 18 different topics and concepts that I want to do these topics on. Um, very thankful if you've stuck this far, very thankful that you're here. I will be posting on my Substack the full report that was pulled from the ChatGPT deep research. I will continue to promote, good ideas. I thank you for being here. Hope to see you next time. Thank you.